Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we have to jump back over to Excalibur, but now we are going to begin our coverage over Alan Davis' run on Excalibur. Now, technically, he was part of the early days of Excalibur when Chris Claremont was the one writing the books, but now Alan Davis is going to be the writer of the books as we go through our coverage over X-Men comics from this point going forward. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Alan Davis, I have to say I love the idea that he does bring back some old concepts we saw in the earlier parts of Excalibur when Chris Claremont was writing the books. And you'll see what I mean as we go through today's video. And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with the TechNet group. Now, we have talked about this group before in the early days of Excalibur. They are a group of mercenaries who was working for Oppo Luna Saturni. Now remember, Oppo Luna is basically the guardian of the Omniverse. She has to make sure that everything goes okay across the Omniverse. Now, with that being said, they were hired by her to go capture the Phoenix, Rachel Summers, back in the early days of Excalibur. But the problem was they failed. And so because they did fail, they were stuck on the main Marvel universe. Now, for this mercenary group, they believe if they are able to get rid of Rachel, then most likely they'll be allowed to finally leave this reality. And so we do pick up with the group of TechNet, and that will be Gatecrasher. Now, when it comes to Gatecrasher, she has a new plan that could most likely get rid of Excalibur, especially the Phoenix, and finally finish the job. Now, getting back over to our heroes, we do see our heroes currently getting back to the Lighthouse. Now, we do learn that they have just handled a big time situation back in the city. And so our heroes are kind of exhausted, but at the same time, they're very upset about what they're hearing on the radio. You see, our heroes are getting a lot of praise for what they had did, but for our heroes, they weren't the only ones out there handling that situation. You see, there were also first responders as well who deserve to get praise as well. Either way, you didn't have Megan say, you know what, let me go ahead and make everybody breakfast. Except when she goes to grab an egg, the egg actually bounces out of the pan onto the table, and then it hatches into this very cute but very strange character, better known as Pooh-Pah 2, and I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, Pooh-Pah 2 is telling Excalibur that they are here to, well, deliver doom to our team. Now, right when it seems like we're about to learn what this character can actually do, you have Nightcrawler realize that a small little chick is actually a bomb. And then boom, there goes the Lighthouse. Now we do learn that TechNet was actually outside watching to see what would happen to Excalibur. Now at first, they do believe that our heroes had possibly died in the explosion. Except when you do have TechNet go over there to make sure our heroes are actually dead, they do find out that, well, our heroes did not die. That matter of fact, our heroes survived just barely. Thankfully to Rachel Summers. Now at first, it's only Kitty Pryde who's awake right now and trying her best to fight against TechNet. But you did have more and more members of Excalibur being able to jump into the battle. The problem is that our heroes were caught off guard, and so unfortunately they don't really have a fair chance in this battle. And it does look like at first our heroes are going to lose until the entire TechNet group is frozen in place. And we do learn who was able to actually freeze TechNet in place. You see, two characters do appear out of nowhere, and that would be Horatio Cringebottom, and honestly, I love that name a lot. It's a pretty funny name. But also another character known as Bert. Now, these two characters, they actually work for Opal Luna Saturnine, and they came here to examine Widget. Now, we had talked about that character before. You see, when it comes to Widget, it has the ability to open up portals into other realities, and really, thanks to Widget, in the early days of Excalibur, our heroes went on an adventure across Marvel's multiverse, being able to see different kinds of realities. And again, thanks to Widget. But the problem is, no one knows its actual origin. And so Bert is here to actually examine it. Now you do have our heroes realize that TechNet does not actually know that Rachel Summers is no longer wanted by Opal Luna Saturnine, that technically those two characters are now on good terms with one another. And so they're kind of wondering, how in the world are they going to tell TechNet, like, hey, the contract you still believe is out there for me no longer exists? Now, getting back over to the origin of Widget, we do learn that technically his insides are just made up of, well, goop. Let me explain. So once you have Bert being able to open up Widget, he does see a pile of trash just inside Widget. And it does seem like that pile of trash actually does make up the inside of Widget. Now, here's the thing though. He also finds this energy matrix, but the problem is no one knows where this came from or how it actually works, or technically what kind of energy matrix it is. And so for everyone there, they're just more confused on the actual origin of Widget. Now, you do have Bert being able to add a program to Widget to not allow him to actually travel across the multiverse anymore. And after doing that, you didn't have Horatio Cringebottom and Bert just leave. Now, before they do leave, you did have Horatio and Bert hand over a small item that came from Opal Luna Saturnine to be delivered over to TechNet. And so once you have those two characters leave, well, you have Excalibur being able to hand over the item to TechNet to show them that, hey, this came from Opal Luna Saturnine. Now, this item is just a hologram message from her telling TechNet that, listen, because you guys have failed so many times to capture the Phoenix, you guys are now permanently banned onto the main Marvel universe. You may not go back home to your own realities. But on top of that, the contract that was out on Rachel Summers no longer exists. Now, for our heroes, they're kind of happy about the idea that Rachel is no longer going to be hunted by TechNet. But the problem is now TechNet is going to be on this planet Earth permanently. And so for our heroes, they feel like this group right here cannot be left alone at all. Because if they are left alone, most likely they're going to cause problems for other people down the road. And so you have Megan and really most of Excalibur except Captain Britain say, you know what? We should watch them. And so they allowed TechNet to move into the Lighthouse. Now, we also see a small kind of moment here where Nightcrawler and Megan are somewhat flirting with one another. And really, that is going to be very important for the next chapter. But now we have to jump over to another reality where we actually pick up on another Earth, Earth 148. Now, this Earth, as we can see right now, it does seem like it was completely destroyed. Now, we don't know what exactly happened here just yet, but we do know one thing, that we do pick up with some character who is right now asking a group of humans to pay homage, except that floating character is then stabbed in the back by another character known as Kai Lun. Now, Kai Lun is actually going to be very important in this next story arc that we're going to talk about in this video in the next couple for Excalibur. Now, when it comes to Kai Lun, apparently he's here to help out these people to fight against a guy known as Necron. Now, when it comes to Necron, we're going to learn more about him also later on in the story arc as well. But apparently for Nylon, Necron must pay for what he did to this Earth, but also so does Excalibur as well. But as we get into Excalibur issue number 43, we actually pick up with Nightcrawler and Megan doing some kind of activity together. But as the activity goes on, well, we actually see Nightcrawler and Megan getting very close to one another to the point where they actually kiss. But then, out of nowhere, at the very end of this section, we actually see Nightcrawler be grabbed by the neck. You see, we kind of find out that Nightcrawler was having a dream. And while having the dream, he was talking in his dream about what he was doing with Megan. As we all know, he was kissing her. Now, of course, Captain Britain heard what Nightcrawler was saying about his dream and got very upset by it. Now, this is another callback to the early days of Excalibur. Let me explain. So, in the early days, you had Captain Britain kind of moving away from being in a relationship with Megan and actually start dating Courtney Ross. Now, it did not actually happen for a lot of different reasons, but for Captain Britain, it did seem like he was no longer wanting to be in a relationship with Megan. And so with their kind of being somewhat single, a free agent, well, Nightcrawler moved in. And honestly, it did seem like those two characters were going to end up together as a couple. Now, of course, it did not happen. But for Captain Britain, he always felt like there was something going on between Nightcrawler and Megan. And well, now he officially knows. Now, he wants to beat down on Nightcrawler, but you have Rachel Summers being able to stop him and send both guys their separate ways. Now, Megan arrives and she has no idea the two guys who cared for her were about to fight to the death, it seemed like. To her, it was just another day. She kissed Captain Britain and goes downstairs to do other things in the lighthouse. Now, the next few pages of the book is really more of Captain Britain trying his best to find a place in the lighthouse where he is actually able to sit down and read a book. But the problem is TechNet has now moved into the lighthouse. And so with them being there and also the members of Excalibur, this guy has nowhere else to go to actually sit down and read a book quietly. Now, it does lead into the moment where he does learn they have built this advanced version of an elevator. But the problem is, when he does learn about it, he on accident stepped into the elevator and he was shot up to the top part of the lighthouse. Now, he did crash pretty hard, which did cause him kind of get a somewhat minor injury, caused him to be somewhat dazed. Because of that, though, he believes that he sees Nightcrawler and Megan kissing, and this leads into the next problem, where you have Captain Britain actually wanting to kill off Nightcrawler. Not kill him off, but beat him down to the point where the man is not going to be able to walk for most likely a couple days. But you have Nightcrawler trying his best to not fight back against Captain Britain, but really try to play defense. Now, why are the two guys going back and forth? They're doing more and more damage to the actual lighthouse. And that is a major problem right there. But either way, the battle is stopped once again by Rachel, but also because of Megan. Now, the next part is really more of Megan trying to explain to us how her powers properly work. Now, we already know when it comes to Megan, she is a shapeshifter. Yes, we got that part, but she's also an empath as well, where she is able to pick up on other people's feelings. And sometimes when she does that, it does affect her other abilities. And sometimes she has a hard time trying to work through what other people are actually feeling. And so earlier, when it came to Nightcrawler, he was falling in love with Megan, and she did pick up on that, but she thought it was more like love for a friend, not love for a woman to possibly become a girlfriend and then maybe a wife down the road. And so she's kind of like, I thought you understood that I'm still learning how my powers work. I'm still learning how to work through you people's feelings. Like, This is all new to me. And here you are right now fighting over me like I'm some kind of prize. And so you have Megan just leave. And you have both guys feel, well, guilty about what they just did. But then out of nowhere, Captain Britain is then grabbed by other Captain Britons from different realities and pulled to somewhere else. Now, I want to jump back over to that other reality, the other Earth, where we actually pick up with Kai Lun. Now, we do see Kai Lun and his army being able to save the princess, better known as Satnine. And I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. Now, for Satnine, she's the last member of the royal family of this reality of Earth. But to Nylon, he believes that technically they are now ready to go after the big enemy, better known as Necron. But like I said earlier, we have no idea who this Necron character truly is just yet. But shifting our focus back over to Brian Braddock, we do learn that he was actually taken to the home base for the Captain Britain Corps. Now, we have not really talked about this organization before, so let's go ahead and dive into this real quickly. So, the Captain Britain Corps is basically an organization in Marvel's comics where in each reality, there's supposed to be a Captain Britain in some kind of way to protect that reality they come from. But on top of that, they all come together to form the Captain Britain Corps to make sure that all realities are protected. And so for Brian Braddock, he was assigned his own reality to make sure that Earth 616 is always protected. But here's the thing though, the reason why he's brought here to the base and right now being put on trial is because this man broke the law basically on Earth 616 in London, where you are not allowed to assault people, which of course he did when he fought against Nightcrawler, when he was so upset in the idea that Nightcrawler may have feelings for his woman. And so because Captain Britain, our Captain Britain, did that, they're kind of like, hey, you broke the law in your own reality, and that is a problem. Now, out of nowhere, you do have Humpman England appear. Now, he's one of the Captain Britons, but he comes from the world where the Nazis had actually won. And we saw that reality a few times in our past few videos for Excalibur. But apparently, he is the one who's going to give the punishment for our Captain Britain. Now, getting back over to Rachel and Megan back on the main Marvel Universe Earth, we do see Megan still very upset about the idea that Nightcrawler and Captain Britain fought against each other for her, over her. But she's also upset about the idea that she has no idea where her parents went to. Now, when it comes to Megan, she does not remember everything about her past. And so for Rachel, her goal is to kind of dive into the mind of Megan to see maybe there are some clues that were left behind that could help them find where her parents had actually went to. Now, when it comes to Rachel, when she does go into the mind of Megan, well, she finds basically almost nothing. But it did trigger an old memory where you have Megan realize that maybe some old friends of hers might have an idea where her parents went to, the Scott family. Now, we're going to shift our focus on to the Lighthouse, where we pick up with Alistair Stewart. Now, we had actually talked about this character before. You see, Alistair Stewart works for an organization known as WHO, Weird Happening Organization, where they go around the world to investigate weird things happening across the world. Now, for today's video, that's not really important. What is important is that when it comes to Alistair Stewart, he arrived at the Lighthouse looking for Rachel. And we're going to see a good old love triangle coming back into the picture again. Let me explain. So early on in Excalibur comics, Alistair established that this man had some feelings for Rachel Summers, but Kitty Pryde had feelings for him. And so it did cause a love triangle. Now for Rachel, it did seem like she may have some feelings for Alistair, but she's not really trying to make any attempts to be with him. Now he is trying so hard to be with her. Either way, when he does arrive at the lighthouse, he is looking for Rachel, but she is not there. And he wanted to take Rachel to some kind of date idea. But again, she's not there, but Kitty is. And you have Kitty say, hey, why don't I go with you instead? And so you have Kitty and Alistair leave. But again, it continues the love triangle between these characters. Now, getting back over to the other reality, we do pick up with Kailan and Princess Satnine, where we do see them still being able to lead a rebellion against the character known as Necrom. And honestly, these 2 pages is kind of more just a check-in to see that what they're doing at the moment, and we're seeing that they're doing a good job taking down Necron's army. Now, getting back over to Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, we do pick up with Rachel and also Megan visiting the Scott's family. Now, the Scott's family was actually a group of people who took Megan in, and then you had Captain Britain being able to meet her that way. Either way, when it comes to Megan, she's hoping that they might have an idea where her family could possibly be yet. But the problem is, they don't have any idea where her family could be yet. But they do hand her a pamphlet to go see a psychic, better known as Madame Zelda, who might be able to tell Megan where her parents actually are at. But now I want to jump back over to Nightcrawler. And the reason why, because you have Nightcrawler still trying to recover after getting one heck of a beatdown earlier from Captain Britain. But then he's confronted by Dave Thomas. Now, Dave Thomas is another character that we had talked about before. Dave Thomas is just a guy who's a detective in London, but he's also with another character known as Amelia Witherspoon. Now, Amelia is actually someone who has the ability to predict things before they actually happen. And she was able to predict that crimes were going to happen in a certain Scotland Yard. But the problem is, even though she was able to predict those crimes, they were unable to capture anybody there at all. And so what she wants to do is use Excalibur as a way to stop the next crime, but to also get the people who are committing the crimes. But the problem is, Excalibur is currently not here at the moment. As we saw earlier, every single member of Excalibur went their separate ways. And so right now, it's just Nightcrawler in the TechNet group. But you have Dave Thomas say, they can work, use them to hopefully figure out who in the world is committing these crimes at the Scotland Yard. Now, getting back over to Megan and Rachel, they do go see the psychic, except when they do, you have Rachel stay outside while you have Megan go inside. Now, when Megan does meet the psychic, Madame Zelda, the psychic begins to freak out. But Megan is there to talk to her to hopefully figure out where her parents could possibly be yet. Now, we're going to shift our focus onto Rachel. Because while she waits outside for Megan to come back, you have Rachel realize at a nearby store, a nearby antique store, inside there, a random dagger is just floating away. But Rachel can see that somebody is actually using some kind of ability to grab the dagger and walk away with it. Except when you have Rachel try to stop that person, she's stopped from behind by a new character known as Micromax. Yes, that is his name, Micromax, and he works for the FI6. FI6 is a secret government agency in Great Britain, and apparently they were there to also capture the person who was trying to steal that dagger. Except when it comes to Micromax here, he believed at first it was Rachel Summers, not realizing that somebody else was in the room. And so he went after her, and really, she was about to give him one heck of a beatdown, but they were stopped by fellow officers or fellow guys who work for the FI6 and say, hey, Micromax, she's right, she's innocent. She was not the one who had took the dagger. It was somebody else. Now, by the end of that conversation, Megan does come out, and Megan does inform Rachel that the psychic had basically told her that her parents might be in France. Now, I want to wrap up today's video by getting back over to Captain Britain's trial, because the trial does get a whole lot worse right here. Let me explain. So, when we do jump over to Captain Britain, we do learn that technically they're going to add on more crimes that he had apparently committed. So, for example, the idea of him working alongside with the other members of Excalibur as a team is actually a huge no-no. Now, for me personally, that makes no sense at all. And here's the reason why. Because Huntman England actually works with another version of the Excalibur team, better known as the Lightning team in his reality. But apparently, still a huge no-no. Now, there was also a time where you had Excalibur travel across the multiverse. Now, that took place back in the Cross-Time Caper story arc. And in that story arc, thanks to a small device known as Widget, who we did talk about earlier in this video, he was able to open up portals to allow our heroes to travel across the multiverse. But the thing was, they were kind of forced to do it. They were actually innocent. But for the Captain Britain Corps, that's still a huge problem. You traveled across the multiverse without any kind of permission. And then finally, he fought other members of the Captain Britain Corps at the tail end of the Cross-Time Caper. And so because of all those different things, you have the Corps say, we believe that you should be permanently benched, meaning that you should die for the crimes that you had committed. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.